Hey guys, welcome to session number 36 of the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. Let's dive in, guys. One man with one microphone who once booked a flight to Morocco for the wrong month. Welcome to the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. Hey guys, I have quite a special episode for you today. I mean, I do tend to say that quite a lot, but a lot of you have been asking me to get on some other people other than just composers to help you on your journey. So I've reached out to an editor that I know mostly because we grew up in the same town, and he messaged me going, "Hey, I'm from the same town as you." So yeah, there we go. So I reached out to him and he happily agreed, which is wonderful. And the episode we have is huge in its repercussions for your careers. The guy's name is Ric Thomas. He's done some amazing work. You should go check out his website, ricthomaseditor.com. See what he's done. He also has an amazing podcast, which we call up in 2, where he discusses trailer music and trailers in general. The thing I want to focus on is what he tells you as an editor he looks for in the music and how to get an editor's attention. Because those things that get an editor's attention are usually the same things that get a music supervisor's attention or a publisher's attention. And they're absolute gems. So keep your eyes and ears peeled because Rick gives away some absolute golden nuggets of goodness. Let's dive in, guys. Ric Thomas, trailer editor extraordinaire. Welcome to the Trailer Music Composers Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. That was an enormous mouthful. Okay, so I like to start the podcast with an informal question. Now, as you are my first trailer editor on the podcast, so it's been composers up till now and mostly me rambling away in the woods. The question is here, so I'm going to change. My normal question is, if you were an instrument, what would it be and why? But for you, it's going to be a special change, Rick.
If I was an editing program, what editing program would that be?
Yes. If you were a trailer, which one would you be and why?
Oh, wow. If I was a trailer, I think I would be... And it's something I talk about a lot, actually, and it's an absolutely ridiculous trailer to call to mind, and everyone else in the industry has probably forgotten it. But it's the trailer for B-Movie, but B-Movie was an animated movie, but it had Jerry Seinfeld, so you had to have so you wanted to show that it was Jerry Seinfeld, and maybe they hadn't animated stuff, so they just threw everything out of the window, and they did Jerry Seinfeld in a bee suit,
Oh, yeah.
ambling around a soundstage, like flying around a soundstage, like on a windowsill, around a big flower, like on the windshield of a car. And then every one of these skits, there were 2 or 3 of these trailers. I think Steven Spielberg was in there. And then at the end, they just get to it and they go, it's a cartoon. It's a cartoon. I like it. And I think why the trailer for B-Movie defines me is that I'm always trying to make things difficult. No, I'm always trying to do something different, and don't choose the. Actually, maybe it's the opposite of me. I don't choose the easy path. Anyway.
Nice. Good answer. Good answer. I thought you were going to say.
If I was going to be an instrument, I would be a ukulele. Actually, no, I'm not small. Hold on. Oh God.
It could be a bass ukulele. They're pretty big.
I'm just going to say acoustic guitar. I don't know. That's
nice.
There wasn't as much interesting
that one. Okay, so can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? You know, what's your story? Where you are now? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
So currently, I'm in a house editing trailers, but in Los Angeles, but with my family around me, which is the situation that a lot of trailer editors find themselves in the moment. But before that, so I've been a trailer editor for about 15 years. I'd always edited stuff. I didn't know that I necessarily wanted to do it as a job. I used to like crash camcorder footage onto VHS, like I'd always done that. But I was actually really into theatre and music and stuff like that. So I was a drummer and various kind of creative things ticking along, but I thought I wanted to be a director or something in theatre. But actually, I went to university in Lancaster, and we did a very kind of contemporary theatre course, and there was a ton of editing involved in it. It was the first time I found non-linear editing through a computer. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, oh, wow, all of this stuff that used to be really hard and kind of analog and cutting from tape to tape is streamlined here, and you have so many options. And I really was drawn to that. And I thought, right, well, I want to edit. So I graduated, went to London, applied for every runner's job out there. Didn't get them because on paper I had a degree in theatre studies, but eventually, luckily, ended up in one of London's few trailer shops called Empire Design. And this was in 2005, and I started as a tape op there, really enthusiastic, and started editing within about a year, and kind of haven't looked back. So I was in London for a while. Empire also has an office in New York, so I've been there a bit, and then eventually made the choice to move to LA, which is obviously where a lot of the trailer industry is.
Nice.
And there you go. There's the potted history.
Hey, I like it. You missed out the important part that actually we're both from the same hometown.
Yeah, I did. I missed the first 18 years of my life. For 18 years of my life, I was in Reading and around Reading, which I believe you are also.
Oh yeah, still there. Whoop. Yeah, I'm from Reading. Yeah, that's my whole story. In 3 words.
I'm from Reading, and then I started doing trading music.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, then I hit the big time just accidentally. No,
did you
love
go
that.
away anything, or did you study, or did you go like?
Oh, I moved along the Western Railway line. So I went to Swindon, then went to Bristol, and then came back to Reading.
Nice.
I know. I didn't quite go as far as LA, but I always liked the idea of being away from everything, but still being able to get my work out there to the right people.
Yeah, well, I mean, as the world changes, it seems like people can kind of work from anywhere. I mean, as you're kind of proving, right? You're creatively making work, but you don't have to be in London for that. Like as things were probably 15 years ago when I started. Again, there was no option of really doing anything in London, especially outside of London, especially in film.
Yeah, we were probably. I mean, I did used to go back and forth from Reading to London. So when did I start? It was about 2007 was when I started making connections in London. But it's the same thing. It felt like nothing was happening outside of London. So I'd have to go to these networking events in London, go to the offices of the publisher in London. Yeah, but gradually it's all just expanded, which is lovely. I say gradually. 13 years.
There's a composer I work with a lot called Jordan Rees, who's was in London, but now he's out in Cardiff. So he's equally going west.
I think me and Jordan have definitely rings a bell.
Featured on albums, maybe.
Probably, or at least spoken on Instagram. That seems to be where all the composers mingle.
What was it? My friend Derek, who does my trailer podcast with me, would say LinkedIn is where the trailer composers hang out.
Right. That was actually a huge move going from London to LA. I mean, you've got a family. Was that a tough decision?
Not really. I mean, it was around the time of Brexit, so we kind of thought, if we have this opportunity to do something and be somewhere else, then this was, again, this was about 3 years ago, so it's kind of time to do it. Obviously, some people would say the grass isn't particularly greener, obviously at the moment, but it's the same stuff in a different country, although the weather is better. I hate to say it, but we have the blue skies are here, but also California's on fire, so rough with the smooth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not going to disagree with either of those.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's tough moving. It's tough moving. A lot of people say, and I know a lot of people now who've come over to LA from London or in New York, and they always say that you have one foot in. You either have one foot in the country you left and one foot in the country you're in, and you're kind of between the two, or you kind of jump wholeheartedly with both feet into the new place and just go, right, this is the new reality. And this time that we've moved, hopefully we've done that, and we'll see how it pans out.
Well, all the best. Right. So as you know, you are the first trailer editor to be on my show, on the podcast, and I've had lots and lots of requests for editors because composers are always looking for ways to help themselves stand out, right? To help themselves get noticed. And I often talk about writing music that makes your job as a trailer editor easier. What is it that you look for as an editor in trailer music?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've said it in the past. I mean, obviously, for me, music is the most important thing. Like, there's no bones about it. Like, music has the ability in a couple of seconds to dictate a tone, a pace, a rhythm, a genre, more so than anything else we can do. It's also one of the only things that we can really do to put our print, our kind of fingerprints in a way, but like, it's definitely something that we can kind of impose on the film. So for me, it's just absolutely the most important thing. And when I listen to music, because I've been doing this a long time, trailer music, or any music that I'm thinking of for trailers, I don't have a ton of time to audition stuff. And so I'm looking for that kind of immediate impact whenever I get into something, to go, that is something I haven't heard before. We're always trying to innovate. We're always trying to do something different. We're always trying to react to what's been before, and listen out for a sound, and also listen for the familiar as well. We're not always trying to completely bust the genre, but often we're trying to kind of, again, do something familiar that says, okay, this thing here is a bit like this other thing. So I'm looking for something that has immediate impact, a good tune, and probably one of the most important things for me is peaks and troughs. Stop, downs, stops, sparse sections, ins, outs. I work a lot in comedy, so I need a lot of dropouts. I don't want to look at a waveform. And that's actually sometimes how I do this. I will look at the waveform to kind of give a track a kind of identity, and I'll see, okay, right, 3 big sections, here's a dropout, and we need builds. We don't have 4 minutes to play out a cue. We have, I'm cutting stuff at the moment, it's 15-second TV spots. We need relatively quick rounds. It can't be a phrase that lasts, 20 seconds to, I don't know if phrase is the right thing, but like 4 bars can't be 20 seconds, because like
sequence,
you've got 2 sequences and you're out of your trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is all very fluid, and that one rule doesn't necessarily stand for everything, but these are the kind of things that I'm looking for.
See, it's so nice hearing all of those things, because it's so important to kind of have an end point for us in mind. Obviously, we've got our publishers sort of telling us what they want. They're kind of dictating the albums to an extent, to a larger extent, but we have control over some elements, and to some people it might have more control. Now, the thing that really interests me is, so say for instance, you got a ton of tracks sent to you. If you were to, because I know how I skim through a track. I go sort of bang 30 seconds in, bang the last 30 seconds, and if either of those get me, I'll go into the middle, and then perhaps I'll listen through.
Yes, yeah, very familiar, very similar to that, because we don't have a ton of time to audition stuff. My process is that I will overfind music, because I'm always, and this, again, I can't speak to everyone else's, but this is my own individual way of working, and it's worked for me, that I over listen to music, because partly by putting the effort in there's a high chance that I will find a cue that will do all my work for me in a way, and definitely make my job easier. And also, it's good to have backup cues. So, I have a process whereby I traffic light stuff. So I'll just grab a huge kind of catch-all bin of, albums that seem to be in the right kind of genre, so yeah, kind of album outlines are really key. I'll get a huge kind of grab bin of stuff. Often I'll go to really recent stuff, and it's sad when like, for you guys probably when you've got cues that are a couple of years older, but I will go for newer stuff because I'm always looking for something new, and I don't necessarily want something that's been used or synced before, even though the amount of people who would know that are very few. And then I'll kind of traffic light them. But yeah, to do that, I'm listening to maybe 10 seconds in, and then maybe just skipping to like 20 seconds before the out. And it is so immediate. Like we're not demeaning your art when we do that. I think like, and that may sound disrespectful, and everything should have its like moment in the sun to listen, but practically we don't have that time. And I think it's immediate. You just kind of know. And partly that's having done it for 15 years and being kind of obsessed with trailers and watching a lot of trailers that get released. And part of that is just taste and your kind of inherent sense as an editor, which is what we're trying to do, create.
See, I just love, it's so nice for me to talk about this side of the creative process, because
actually, yeah, I don't know how I mean, we should do this more often, because it's actually really interesting, like getting your perspective as well on how that stuff's created. And again, I get clues from looking at the shapes of cues that people have at some point gone, oh yeah, we need some stop downs, but like and all right, Plucks are a thing, so let's make some Pluck albums.
Plucking Plucks.
The plucking Plucks. I think the time for the plucking Plucks is over, maybe.
Oh, I hope not. I bloody love a good pluck,
you know what it does? A pluck with a great card where the things, thing again, and that's looking for something that sparks an idea again, and it's about making my job easier, but only because music is so important. I think sometimes I'll take a cue. Sorry, and I've completely talked over you, but it kind of sparked a thought.
No, go for it.
Sometimes I'll take those cues, and it might be when I've done my kind of first pass of like, okay, what sparked an interest in me, and I'll have my bin of 20 things that I was like, okay, these are worth listening to in more depth, and I'll put some abstract shots down on a sequence, and I'll put the music cues underneath that, and I'll see what seems to be working kind of tempo wise and tone wise, and if I and sometimes you get those perfect moments of serendipity. I think I was doing something recently, I've talked about it before, but I put a cue under, and at the first like ping, I weirdly think it might have been one of your cues, Richard. I think there was, it was like a piano. It was just like, I'll find out what it was after this, but like it was a slow kind of intro, and then there was like a ding, and that ding happened to come with a card that I put on my timeline. And at that moment I was like, well, all right, great, fine. This
happened.
This is what I'm using. This is, and yeah.
Wow, great, good for me. The nice thing is, right, that you said when you talk about, because obviously you do a lot of comedy stuff, looking for stops, cuts, interesting variations in the bars, interesting changes, so that it doesn't feel like a monotonous 3-act cue. However, that's not always the case, is it, for other genres of trailers? For instance, obviously slow burns are a huge one for us as composers, sort of hybrid slow burns. Generally, that's going to be one massive build with perhaps a stop before the 3rd act.
Yeah, but you've got to know that I might skip ahead. For every build that you do, I might skip ahead a build. And that's the most important thing. Like, you've got to look at where you're starting, the sparseness of the start. And yeah, I mean, cliches abound in trailers, right? But like, you've got to look at your sparse start and where you get to, and there's got to be enough kind of contrast there for enough stuff has to have been added that I can kind of make those leaps and it feels bigger. And I love a slow burn, and maybe a slow burn with a mid-late. I don't know, like, doesn't have to be a stop down, but a kind of, okay, there's always there's a cue on the first the Star Trek reboot trailer.
2 Steps from Hell.
it Two Steps from Hell?
Uh,
And it was then they, even, which is rare for a library cue, they locked it down after that point and were like, no one else can use this. Something about mountains, moving mountains. And there's a point in that trailer where it kind of, it's been building, and then there's a bit where it's like, someone's like, this ship doesn't have a captain. And he's like, it does now. And that's like the kind of story middle 8 bit. And then it kind of relaunches again, but it's bigger, you know? So yes, that again, and different genres do different things. Yeah. You know, that's what I'm looking for. Horror, I'm looking for something completely different as well. I mean, actually comedy and horror are quite different, because you are going to stop down potentially for a kind of scare moment or go really sparse before coming back in. And yeah, so there are cliches to all of these things, but it works. And again, we're telling stories in the short form. You know, like I say, I'm cutting 15-second TV spots. I'm cutting 6-second TV spots. Things have to read quickly. But then also, you know, you look at a lot of stuff that came out of DC Fandom this weekend. Some of those things were long, slow burn cues where you have that kind of cumulative effect, and it builds and it builds, and you're on that journey.
Yeah, that type of cue is used for a specific type of trailer and for a specific type of ripples in the pond. You know, they're going for the big. They're going like, okay, we're doing this trailer. It's a long form. People are going to sit down and watch it. We want to build the excitement, and it's the same with us as composers. That's what we're trying to do with the slow burn.
And we don't have to change, cues as well. Yes, right. Yeah. Avengers Endgame, you're going to cut a trailer for that. You're not going to go from like Spandau Ballet to like swagger rock to reimagine Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, you're not, although that sounds fantastic. You're gonna do one cue that carries you through and gives you that like epic cumulative sense.
So I think that I don't know whether you know, I have a trailer music school where I teach people how to write trailer music, and often they don't fully understand that trailer music is more than just epic hybrid, right? And the lovely thing about what you're doing is that you're kind of showing, actually, like, for instance, with some trailer music, we just say, give them 3 acts and do 2 stops. Leave it at that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Standard. That's kind of like your run-of-the-mill bog standard template, right? But with comedy and with TV spots specifically, I would say to them, okay, you're going to want to grab their attention immediately, and you're going to want to give them tons of little variation and almost drum fills throughout, where you give them variation of layers. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No. Yeah. Drum fills, accents, like anything that, you know, there's a big kind of thing. Anything that you can do to kind of get attention, anything that reads quickly, and like stab for bringing on cards, like all of that kind of stuff, especially, and you know, that kind of stuff goes into action as well. You know, all epic hybrid stuff doesn't have to be kind of sad and the world's ending and we're sad about it. Like, it can be heroic and fun and swaggery action as well, you know, like a Thor kind of thing. Or like Wonder Woman, like that, but with synths.
Yeah.
But also then maybe with a bit of edge, like a bit of a kind of hip hop hybrid. Like TV spots actually are a very interesting thing, because it's distilled down versions of what we're talking about. Because it is like, yes, that 5-minute cue is potentially only going to be the first 10 seconds of this TV spot, and maybe we'll go somewhere else, but like you've done enough that it has some really cool, immediately readable sound design that I hadn't heard before. So it's arresting. You know, ultimately that's what a TV spot is about doing. It's about grabbing people's attention and making them shouting, "Hey, there's a thing on your TV that you've got to pay attention to."
Yeah, sit back on the sofa.
And you know, that applies to digital as well, although a lot of people listen to digital spots kind of mute, so you miss that kind of initial impact, and people might turn their audio on, but you know, it's all kind of part of the same thing.
I suppose that interesting with the digital spots. I presume you're talking about like socials and things like that in the feed.
Yes.
Yeah. So would you cut those differently, knowing that they're going to be muted first, and would that alter your choice of music?
I don't think it would alter my choice of music necessarily, because, ultimately something's got to be produced as if people are going to be listening to it with audio from the top. So it doesn't necessarily change our style. It does change our editorial style in terms of the kind of content that we're putting up front in the spot, that it will be less like open on a big wide of a shot. It will be like open with someone's face. And actually this comes more into kind of graphics and things like that. So, assuming that a lot of people watch stuff mute, then maybe it would be doing something interesting with the subtitles, or a kind of graphical container device, that you're not just being like, hey, here's a 15-second TV spot that you have to pay attention to. It's like, here's some great visuals and some graphics that you connect with in that more online, digital, social way. But I don't think musically it makes a huge difference. Also, I mean, at that stage, because that comes later down the campaign, currently, the world is ever changing. But because usually that stuff is later down the campaign, the kind of sound design and tone and music of the campaign has been kind of decided. So you'd use something that's already in play on the campaign.
So I do love the fact that you've started to kind of hint at the wider world of the business. Can you walk us through the process of you starting and ending a campaign as an editor?
Yeah, I mean, every campaign is different. Currently, I'm working at a trailer house called Booty Jones, and this is kind of like the ideal process. But as I say, every process is different. Will be the studio gets in contact with us, and there's always a producer involved with that. And then we'll have initial meetings, and we'll bring all the departments on board. So music, obviously a huge part of this. As you say, we're the kind of end point of where these things are going, editors, but music also kind of, our music supervisors in the trailer business live and breathe this, commercial cues and library cues. And they have so many relationships with people, and they're kind of pushing and saying, hey, we love this, but can we do something different with it? Because they're also, they're always trying to kind of innovate and do something different as well. So music will be involved in that, and copywriters and creative directors. And the point that we get the movie can completely vary as well. We'll either get dailies that they're shooting, or if it's animation, we'll get very kind of early storyboard versions of the movie, or we'll have a fully formed feature, or we'll have a script and we're doing kind of special shoot concepts or something like that. But if I had there's already a cut of the feature that might be long, then we'll kind of obviously take in to account the client's brief. We'll come up with our own ideas internally, and we'll start producing whatever the client has asked for: a trailer, a teaser, TV campaign, digital, social, like a whole holistic, like, okay, here's what your trailer one's going to look like, and your trailer two, and we can do that as well, like shape the whole thing. But my job as an editor at the kind of coalface of it is to start breaking that down into its constituent pieces and thinking about it more as, how can we represent this entertainment product in a way that the client wants, and in a way that's going to get bums on seats, be it in their home or in theatres or at drive-ins or whatever the future's going to look like.
So if you're getting dailies, there's the rushes, right? If you're getting dailies from them, that is a ton of material to be sifting through constantly, surely.
Yes, yeah. I mean, luckily we have an amazing team of assistant editors as well, who will actually often create their own version of the film in tandem. So I know certain editors who will go through all the dailies because they don't want to know that great shot out there is there that they haven't seen themselves, but often kind of will rely on an assembly that's been done in-house in kind of coordination with the script. So gradually we'll start to create our own feature version of it. And there can be a thing where, I've worked on Apatow type comedies where your assembled feature is 7 hours, because for every joke you have every improvised joke. So they're very strange kind of things they're actually created for the editorial process. Like if you watch them as a film, they would be different because they try and get every angle in there. So we're at least aware of them. They try and get every kind of, variation on line or joke in there. So yes, they are slightly, I mean, it can be hundreds of hours of material. But often we do have a kind of process of paring that down. And then obviously I look at something and I break that down into the stuff that I think might be interesting and then break that down again. And gradually all part of kind of distilling it down to the bits that I think are going to work. And again, that's taste and experience.
At what point does the music enter? Does the music enter with the assistant editors doing their long form film cuts, or does it enter when you start breaking those down?
It can do, It's really interesting because actually that's a really key point for trailer music composers, is that we're not looking at that film in anywhere near a finished state. And that speaks to VFX and things like that. So obviously you have to use a bit of imagination there. But also tonally, we don't know, it's not even necessarily at that stage at the point where they've got some temp score, unless there's something playing like as they shoot it. Mm-hmm. So tonally, sometimes it's really hard to kind of gauge where these films are going to be, because you watch the dailies for most things, you have no kind of concept. It's a real kind of peek behind the curtain. So music, yes, can come. It probably can help the assistant editors as they start to paste something together. I remember years ago we were working on the movie Battleship, and we did an assembly of that. And I think at the end we kind of, the final sequence, it was just kind of disconnected bits of action. So you couldn't just put them on a timeline. So we put a big, what are you saying, like a slow epic burn cue under it to kind of give it some shape. And actually, that's what they do when they make films sometimes, especially when you get towards the end of the film, you have that one cue that can take you through, Christopher Nolan style, through
the emotional
so
climax.
Much kind of intercutting, the emotional climax. But music will come in as I start to cut. And then we'll have conversations with the music supervisors about, what can we do if we don't necessarily have a tonal direction dictated. Again, I always like to lead with the film. So if we do have a finished feature that's even got temp score, you can kind of see where it's going and reflect what it's doing. Often, obviously, if the score is completed, we're not necessarily going to use that because film score is not designed in the way that you write music for trailers. It's designed to hit all of those little moments and peaks and troughs and emotional and jokes and pratfalls, and it doesn't have the kind of consistency that you have, which is why a lot of film score was used 10 to 15 years ago for trailers, but less so now. And obviously it arrives very late in the process, so we've probably been cutting for 6 months before anywhere close to a finished score is done.
Yeah, it's one of the last things in the process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mate, this is all awesome. So I'm always interested about creative barriers. So you've talked about time obviously being a huge one for you, because you've obviously got the time to sift through the film footage, you've got the time to sift through the music. What other creative barriers do you face when editing, say, a 15-second TV spot?
Time is a huge factor in terms of turning it around as well. I mean, ideally we'd like 2 weeks to cut everything, but frequently, those deadlines can kind of move, and often great inspiration comes out of, we've got 2 days to do something, and you kind of burn through it. And I would love to have the luxury. I probably would still cut that quickly, but I would cut that quickly and then look at it and go, oh, it's right. And that's the kind of luxury you miss when you're kind of condensed on time, is the ability to look at something. And you probably do this in music, is the kind of time to take it and say, okay, I'm not just rushing to get this down on a timeline and done and out, to have the luxury to be able to say, actually, you know what, valid creative exploration, but I'm going to do this thing. And the amount of times I'll duplicate is absolutely ridiculous. My timeline, like any time that I make some kind of creative decision, I'll bank that and move on and try something.
Variation 45.
Yes, final, this one, Tuesday afternoon. I'm sure for you guys it can be really hard to know when to know when to kind of say enough is enough. And maybe time is a good factor for that, because, and maybe I would keep tinkering with something, but yeah, I think that's actually a kind of key part of being a trailer editor, is saying, okay, this is enough. Let's put it out there and see what happens. Because then, obviously, a huge factor for us, which maybe you guys don't get, other than unless someone comes back to you and says, we like this, but can it do this? Is that's like such a huge part of our process. You have version 1, and then from that point, it's months and months sometimes of revisions and versions, and you can't assume that you have the best opinion in the room. Obviously, there's internal points of view. That again, there's producers, music guys, writers, and then you have the client, and the clients have bosses, and they will test things, and everyone will kind of chip away to get the thing that works really best for that product. And sometimes it looks like what the version 1 was, and that's great. And sometimes a lot of times it gets better as it goes. Yeah, as it's really worked and honed.
It's similar with customs for us, obviously. So most of the work I do, in fact, I've pretty much said no to most customs these days, because I'm just like, I'm just going to do the work I want to do. And unless, of course, it's that situation where they've gone, we've got your track on this cut of this trailer, but can you just do this? And then I'll do that. But yeah, so when I've done customs back in the day, so you mentioned Battleship. I used to work for Pusher back then when they landed that Battleship. I think it was the 3rd Battleship trailer with Superhuman. This like huge dubstep mashup thing. And so yeah, doing customs there was like endless iterations, if you even got that far.
Yeah, and it can be tough. Like, nobody wants to. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I had to get over in my first 5 years, is obviously to do anything creative, you have to kind of pour so much of yourself in there. And you get this with trailers. Like, I always want to do the best job, and I have to kind of believe in what I'm doing. I think if I get to the point where I'm like, it's only a 15-second TV spot, who cares? I'll bash it out. Like, I'm still not at that stage 15 years later. And so you have to believe and feel strongly about what you're doing. And so that is going to be hard when someone turns around and goes, no, don't like that, don't like the music, it's hard to hear. But obviously, again, people have their reasons, and you just have to keep on tracking. And I think that kind of creative resilience is probably the most important thing for trailer editors, and I'm sure it might be for composers too.
Oh yeah, I have done actually a podcast episode about the huge knocks to your ego that you get if you do custom work. It can, when I first started out, it was just hugely demoralizing, because it's as composers, it's not like they turn around to us and go, no, it's not right, carry on working with us. It's like, no, it's not right, see ya. So you're like, nah.
But also, you don't get that feedback loop that we get. Like, whatever we do, we're getting feedback. Whereas sometimes you put stuff out there and it's hard to know if it's hitting or not, and you don't get that feedback loop, which can be hard until it gets used, and you're like, all right, well, I might have been doing something right.
Yeah. I mean, and then what happens is the publisher will go, okay, so these albums have done well, let's do some more of those. So yeah,
makes sense. I mean, ultimately, that is, it is a business, and that's kind of something you've got to come to terms with as well.
Yeah,
but also, one where you get a huge amount of creativity. I mean, that's what I talk about it a lot. That trailer editing is actually a very kind of showy form of editorial. Editorial is very traditionally supposed to be kind of behind the scenes and invisible. And only when you get something like that scene in Bohemian Rhapsody that's on YouTube, where someone pointed out how like terrible the editing is, it's only there that you realize. Whereas trailers are actually, often people will talk about the trailer editors and kind of have this base knowledge, increasingly so, of what we do.
You guys are the lead guitarists of the editor world.
I'll take that. Or the acoustic guitar with a B movie.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Nice tie-in. I liked it. I'm very keen to kind of get your advice to my listeners and my students, because obviously it's fine hearing it from me what editors want, but it's even more important to hear it from an editor what an editor wants. We've covered it a little bit, but I want to ask you more of a kind of novelty direct question. Like, if you
Sure.
were to give an aspiring composer some tips for making like amazing trailer music, and we'll pick a couple of genres for this, because I think comedy is a really important one, because people overlook comedy trailer writing all the time, but it's so much fun to do. So we'll pick comedy as the first one. What would your advice for them be for a comedy?
Yeah, it is kind of overlooked, and I guess maybe it's less showy, but there's so much out of it. There's so much out there. As kind of theatricals changed over the last kind of 5 years, the consistency of kids animated films. There's one of those every couple of weeks when theatricals running as it has been doing prior to the pandemic. And obviously that stuff shifted to streaming now as well. So comedy can be really kind of changeable as well. I mean, what comedy is, you can't really kind of encapsulate it, because again, it's kind of depends on the genre and kind of again where trailers are now. But yes, accents, places to stop, sections that even in the middle kind of come back a bit smaller. Percussion is a huge factor, and I don't know necessarily whether that's just currently, but and obviously then as well, you kind of within that genre you get kind of like magical orchestral stuff as well. So there's actually, there's huge runs, and like you just talked about dubstep. Comedy of 5 years ago was really edgy kind of like EDM type stuff and hip hop. So there's so much kind of great fun stuff you can do. So in a way, maybe the best thing to do would be to look, because what you're trying to do, and I would say especially on big comedies, is trying to beat the production stuff. Because I think, especially on those kind of films, people are going to go for a commercial cue.
And
so if you can, yes, and a commercial cue that may be trailerized. So there's that work there as well. And especially, when you look to stuff of the 70s that isn't produced as well, you need to kind of give that a helping hand. And that's a kind of interesting thing to do as well. So look at the trailers that are kind of out there, and also what commercial music's doing, but try and bring that, like, okay, so like, for example, like at the moment, it's a terrible example, but I'm going to cut with WAP, the new Cardi B song.
Oh yeah.
And obviously I'm not going to use any of the lyrics because it's like inappropriate and it's breaking the internet, but I'll use that. But actually maybe that's quite like, it's cool, but it's flat and it doesn't have that kind of shape. So I want something that reads like, that sounds in that world of like, this is cool, edgy, fun stuff that people are listening to, but it has those tenets of trailer music. It has stop downs, it has builds, it has a big back end and a lovely, it doesn't fade out at the end. You know, that you bump into that so many with these kind of cues, it just fades out, especially commercial. Yeah. You're like, okay, great, where's my ending? I'm gonna have to take that guitar stab from halfway down the cue and make that my ending, or put, you know, build my own thing with elements. So yeah, so that's what I would say for comedy. Kind of look what's out there commercially and how can you make that more helpful for an editor in those ways I hopefully talked about.
No, yeah, love it. But the thing is, it's nice because it ties in with the advice I'm often giving. But I want to kind of call back just to one more thing that you mentioned earlier on when you were talking about when you're sifting through music. When something, it's not when it has impact, but when it has an identity immediately. Can you speak of that a little bit? When you hear a track that has identity straight away within a second.
It's kind of hard to distill though. And it's like when you hear it, you know, and it's, you kind of can't say. And I think, you know, to be honest, and I'm looking at stuff, I'm rarely listening to stuff kind of in isolation. I'm listening to stuff with a project in mind. And so it's when that kind of connection happens for me that I'm like, oh, this would be cool for that. But I think a good kind of way to look at it would be to make sure that there's some something unique in there,
Mm-hmm.
some kind of organic element, combination of instruments, tempo, although actually like don't do any kind of, that's a kind of really interesting thing as well. Don't do anything funky tempo wise. Let's keep everything 4/4 forever, please, or 3/4. Just like, I think I had a library cue recently and it was something bonkers like 5/7 or something. I was like, I just can't cut to this. And again, I'm a drummer, so I potentially could work to that, but people have such a kind of inherent sense of like, people know like, I can't do a bad music edit. I've listened to stuff, and especially with those older cues, you know, you take That's Live by Frank Sinatra and you try and cut out half the verse, people are going to know. Mm-hmm. And I think at a smaller level, that just happens with music in general, that people can listen to something and go, oh, hold on now, you've cut out on the 2 here. Although, you know, arguably there's a place for that as well, that maybe that thing, like the fact that it unsettles you, and it's looping, but it's like getting a little incrementally faster every time. That's cool. But I mean, I wonder if a lot of that stuff comes from us editorially trying to mix stuff up, and the tracks are more kind of conventional.
Yeah, it's funny you say about odd time signatures. One of my most popular cues from Elephant Music's Throat 2 album, it's in 4/4, which is good because it lands in 4/4, but there's 2 cello lines going on, and one's in 5/4 and one's in 3/4.
What cue is that?
Causality. I think
yes, I've used that. I've used causality.
There we go.
I know, and yes, and I've used it. And so, like, I would have listened to that. And those Throat albums are great. But actually, you know, that's one that if I look at my projects around the time that album came out, that will be one that I pulled probably for a couple of different genres. And so there must be something about that cue, and maybe it is the time signature, that kind of said to me, this is cool and kind of you know, unheard before.
Fab. Well, that's nice to know, isn't it?
There we go, full circle. Yeah, yay. I finished that cue on a TV spot for the film Breaking In, which everyone has probably forgotten at this stage, but it's a really fun little thriller. And
a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, that was probably about 2018.
Yeah.
But I think I've pulled it for stuff since. And again, you know, that goes against my rule of, you know, using stuff again. But like, I would have come back to that and said, all right, well, I've used it, but maybe it could work for this. That
one does get pulled for tone so much. You know, and it's often as a reference, but because it's been used quite a bit, people go, we love this, but we don't want to use it again, which ties into what you were saying earlier about wanting fresh versions of what's come before.
Although I love the literal throat singing on Throat 4 as well. So like, just, it's a shame, like maybe, you know, like I say, like these things are ever moving. And I get libraries that I work with a lot, that I kind of, that I always go back to, and I will kind of dig into the older stuff there as well. But also, you know, so much music's out there.
Yep.
And as I say, our music supervisors are kind of sifting through that on a daily basis, and then I'm pulling my own stuff, which not every editor does. But again, I like to surround myself with music. So.
Well, that's exciting because, as you've said initially, that music is such a huge part of what you do. So it makes sense that you would want to take control of that and not be kind of necessarily spoon-fed the music from your end. But Ric, I've absolutely loved this conversation. It's been so much fun hearing your side of our process as much as it is, I'm sure, for the audience as well. I do want to give the audience a nod that you actually have a podcast. If you want to give it a little shout out right now.
Yes, so I like to talk about trailer. As I said before, I'm kind of obsessed with trailers. And the thing about trailer editing is, like I say, like people are kind of gradually aware of it. But what I found a couple of years ago was that people were looking at trailers and trailer reactions and trailer reviews and things like that. We're talking about the film. You kind of look past the craft of it and you go, the film or TV show, like I like the look of that, and kind of ignoring the craft of the trailer and what's perhaps done to make you think and feel that way. So I got together with a friend of mine called Derek Liu, who's an indie video game trailer editor, who's also very kind of similarly kind of analytical about trailers. And we break down trailers and kind of trailer tropes and trailer trends and kind of explain and dig into, and we talk about music, we talk about genres, and we'll talk about kind of one big trailer and why that was successful or potentially unsuccessful. And it's called The Cut Down, and it's available where you get your podcasts. And maybe we'll do a podcast reverse, and you can come on and talk about trailer music at some point.
I would be honoured because obviously all my listeners are huge trailer nerds, so they would absolutely love the stuff you get to talk about. Also, I love how detailed you guys are about the music and about the cuts and about also the creative choices in an overarching manner rather than necessarily the minutiae of the edits. You talk about actually the creative choices of, say, one film director's trailers and that type of thing. It's fascinating. I think they're going to love it.
But yeah, and again, we're not talking about, okay, so for example, we talked about Sonic the Hedgehog, and that Sonic the Hedgehog trailer was like completely derided, obviously, and everyone said, oh, this is terrible. And actually, we looked at it from a kind of outsider point of view and said, okay, people say that this doesn't work. A lot of that's the kind of reaction to the character design, which got redone. Why might they have used Gangster's Paradise? There's actually some really great sound design in that trailer, like that calls back to the original games, and the graphics are really interesting. And so we're kind of digging into that kind of those editorial. We're trying to discover those editorial choices that may not be immediately evident.
That's great. Yeah, guys, check it out. It's called The Cut Down. Rick, thanks so much for taking your time. I know you're a very, very busy man. You've obviously got lots of dailies and tracks to be sifting through, right?
Yeah, these trailer composers keep sending me music to go through, so I'm going to have to do that. Yeah. But it's great to chat, and thank you. I appreciate the effort. And if any of your listeners have questions, then they can through you or whatever, they can reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at Ric Thomas. Rick no K. Look me up, and I can, I'm happy to help out, like take a listen, offer some advice, whatever.
That's super, super kind of you. Guys, all the details there will be in the show notes. Thanks, Rick.
Great to chat.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it, dude. So chuffed with that episode. I really enjoyed the interview. It was a lot of fun for me, and just nerding out about trailers is always fun. Now, I hope you enjoyed it too, and I really, really appreciate you guys listening. And as ever, if you want to take any of my trailer music courses, head on over to thetrailermusicschool.com. And if you guys are interested in kickstarting your career as a professional composer, head over to protege.school, where myself and Vikram Goody are running an absolute masterclass, a year-long masterclass, which is invite only, mind, in how to take your music and become a professional composer. Thanks, chaps. You are legends.